The Zathran Collective asked for peace 3 weeks after the Battle of Tarsus. They had lost over 60% of their military fleet. Their shipyards were destroyed. Human forces were preparing to attack their homeworld. Council leader Vexcal, who had wanted to escalate the war, had been removed from power by his own people. The new Zathran leadership sent representatives to Admiral Patterson's flagship with a simple message. They would accept any terms to end the war. Patterson met them in the Resolute's conference room. Representatives from the Terran Defense Council joined the meeting through holographic displays. The Zathran representatives, including Thexril, who now led the council, looked defeated. Their natural armor plating seemed dull. Their multiple eyes were downcast. "We seek peace," Thexril said through a translation device. "We acknowledge our attack on your colony was unprovoked aggression. We will pay compensation. We will withdraw from disputed territories. We ask only that you spare our homeworld." Admiral Patterson studied the aliens without sympathy. "You ask for mercy now. Where was mercy when you bombed New Haven? Where was mercy when you trapped civilians underground who had done nothing to threaten you?" "We were wrong," Thexril admitted. "We underestimated humanity. We thought you would respond as other species do, with proportional force and eventual negotiation. We did not understand that you would risk your entire fleet to avenge a single colony." "That is your first mistake right there," Patterson said coldly. "You thought of New Haven as just a single colony, as if the lives there were negotiable, as if some human lives matter less than others. We do not think that way. When you attack one of us, you attack all of us. When you kill our people, you make an enemy of our entire species." He brought up a display showing Zathran territory. "Here are our terms. You will surrender all military vessels capable of faster-than-light travel. You can keep system defense ships, but nothing that can threaten other worlds. You will release every enslaved species in your territory and provide them with resources to rebuild. You will allow human inspection teams to verify compliance, and you will send representatives to New Haven to see what you did, to meet the survivors, and to understand the cost of your minor border incident." The Zathran representatives talked among themselves in their clicking, buzzing language. Finally, Thexril spoke again. "These terms are harsh. They leave us defenseless against other hostile species." "Yes," Patterson agreed. "That is intentional. For the next generation, you will need humanity's protection to survive. You will learn what it is like to depend on the mercy of others. Maybe that will teach you something about attacking the defenseless. And if we refuse these terms," Patterson's expression did not change. "Then we continue dismantling your military until there is nothing left and you get worse terms." "Your choice." The Zathran accepted. They had no other option. 6 months after the attack, New Haven had been rebuilt. The Terran government had poured resources into the colony, not just to repair damage but to expand it. New defenses were installed, including a permanent garrison and an orbital defense platform. The population, increased by new volunteers who wanted to join the colony that had become famous across human space, had grown to 5,000. Governor Linda Martinez stood at the same window where she had been on the morning of the attack, looking out over the rebuilt colony. The scars were still visible. Memorial gardens marked where the living areas had burned. The rebuilt control building was constructed around the preserved ruins of the old one as a reminder. Captain Helen Cruz had come to visit, along with Admiral Patterson, for the dedication of the New Haven Memorial. Every name of the colonists who died defending their home was carved into a massive stone wall at the center of the colony. "Over 1,000 names," Linda said quietly. "Karen Bishop is on there, and Greg, and their daughter Sophie, Dr. Price, Jake Morrison, Chris Bailey, Marcus Webb, Rita Chang, Kevin Walsh. Paul Henderson died in the final assault trying to keep the reactor working. So many good people. They will be remembered," Patterson said. "Every military academy in human space now teaches the siege of New Haven. Every officer candidate learns how 1,000 civilians held off an invasion force with nothing but courage and improvised weapons." "Is it true what people are saying?" Linda asked. "That the other species in the galaxy are afraid of us now?" Cruz nodded. "We have had diplomatic contact from 17 different species since the war ended. They all want treaties, trade agreements, non-aggression pacts. They watched us dismantle the Zathran Collective, and they are wondering if we will do the same to them." "Will we?" Linda asked. "Only if they give us reason to," Patterson replied. "We are not conquerors. We are not the Zathran, but we have made it clear that humans protect their own, and the consequences for attacking us are severe." He gestured to the colony below. New Haven is more than a memorial now. It is a symbol. Every human colony in the galaxy knows that if they are attacked, the full might of humanity will respond. And every hostile species knows that attacking a human settlement means war with all of humanity. That is the lesson of New Haven. The dedication ceremony was attended by thousands, both in person and through holographic connections. Survivors spoke about the siege. Military officers presented medals to the families of colonists who died fighting. Danny Cole, who had survived despite leading some of the most desperate defensive actions, gave a speech that was broadcast across human space. "We were not soldiers," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "We were farmers, engineers, teachers, parents. We came to New Haven to build a life, not to fight a war. But when war came to us, we fought. Not because we were trained for it. Not because we had great weapons or advanced tactics. We fought because this was our home and these were our families, and we would rather die than let them be taken from us." He paused, looking at the memorial wall covered with names. The people on this wall did not want to be heroes. They wanted to watch their children grow up, to tend their gardens, to build something beautiful out here among the stars. They died protecting that dream. The best way we can honor them is to keep building, keep growing, and keep showing the galaxy that humanity does not back down. Across the galaxy, the message was received. In the former Zathran territory, now administered by a coalition that included humans, the freed slave species were rebuilding their societies. They had seen what humanity did for their own colonists, and they understood that the protection now extended to them. Other species, watching from far away, took note. The humans were not the most technologically advanced species in the galaxy. They were not the oldest or the most numerous, but they had shown something that made them uniquely dangerous, an absolute unwillingness to accept attacks on their people, regardless of the cost. The attack on New Haven had indeed been the galaxy's deadliest mistake, not because of the human casualties, but because it revealed something about humanity that would shape galactic politics for generations to come. Humans do not do proportional response. They do not calculate acceptable losses. They do not negotiate with those who harm their people. When pushed, they push back with overwhelming force, accepting casualties and risks that other species consider irrational. It made them feared, yes, but also respected, and for those willing to stand as allies rather than enemies, it made them valuable friends. Linda Martinez met with Thexril during the Zathran representative's required visit to New Haven. The former council member looked old and tired. His armor plating seemed faded. "I wanted to tell you," Thexril said through his translator, "that I argued against the attack. I said humans were an unknown factor, that we should study longer before deciding on action. I was overruled. And now your civilization is dismantled," Linda replied. "Was it worth it? The resources you thought you would gain from our colony?" "No," Thexril said simply. "We gained nothing and lost everything. But I think perhaps this outcome is better for the galaxy. The Zathran Collective was built on conquest. We enslaved 47 species. We believed strength was the only thing that mattered. Your humanity showed us that there are different kinds of strength. The strength to protect others. The strength to help rather than exploit. The strength to respond to cruelty with justice rather than more cruelty." Linda did not feel particularly forgiving. Too many people she had known and loved were dead, but she understood what Thexril was trying to say. "Maybe something good can come from this tragedy," she said. "Maybe the galaxy needed to see that aggression has consequences. Maybe your people needed to learn what they were doing to others." As the sun set over New Haven, casting amber light across the rebuilt colony, Linda thought about the future. This world had been baptized in fire. Over 1,000 people had died defending it. But it survived. The colony was growing again. Children were being born who would never know the siege except as a story their parents told. That was victory enough. In the rebuilt security center, Danny Cole trained new security officers. They would be better prepared than he had been, better armed, better trained. New Haven would never be caught off guard again. In the medical center, Nicole Grant supervised doctors and nurses with equipment and supplies that Dr. Price would have envied. They were ready for anything now, and above the Admiral George Patterson stood in the war room aboard the dreadnought Resolute. He was surrounded by displays showing fleet positions, enemy territory, and battle plans. His staff, some of the best military minds humanity had, waited for his orders. "Let me make sure I understand this correctly," Admiral Patterson said quietly. "The Zathran Collective sent a fleet to attack New Haven. They killed over 1,000 civilians. They trapped the survivors underground for 5 days, and now they think this is over?" "Sir, we intercepted Zathran communications," Commander Lisa Hayes reported. She was the intelligence officer. "They are calling the New Haven attack a minor border incident that went wrong. They are not admitting it was an intentional attack. They claim their fleet was exploring uncharted space and responded to what they thought was a threat." Patterson's jaw tightened. "Lies, complete lies." "Yes, sir. Our analysis of their fleet movements shows this was a planned military operation. They wanted the colony's resources and expected little resistance. And now they are trying to play it off as a misunderstanding to avoid consequences." Patterson turned to his fleet commanders. "Show me the Zathran Collective's territory." The display changed, showing a region of space covering dozens of star systems. The Zathran had been expanding for centuries, conquering and enslaving other species. Their territory was huge. Their fleet had hundreds of ships. Their economy was built on resources taken from occupied worlds. "What do you recommend?" Patterson asked. Captain William Drake of the battleship Thunderchild spoke first. "Surgical strikes against their military bases. Show them we can hurt them without starting a full war." Commander Hayes disagreed. "With respect, sir, surgical strikes will be seen as proportional. The Zathran will conclude they can attack our colonies as long as they accept limited punishment in return. We need to make it absolutely clear that attacking humanity costs more than they can afford to pay." "You are recommending what, exactly?" Drake asked. "Total war," Hayes said bluntly. "Not genocide, not extermination, but we dismantle their military completely. We occupy their core worlds. We make it impossible for them to ever threaten us or anyone else again." The room fell silent. What Hayes was proposing was massive. It would mean using most of humanity's military forces for a single campaign. It would mean months, possibly years of fighting. It would mean casualties. Admiral Patterson studied the displays for a long moment. Then he spoke, and his voice carried the weight of final decision. "If we do nothing, or if we respond proportionally, we send a message to every hostile species in the galaxy. Human colonies are acceptable targets. The cost is manageable, but if we respond with overwhelming force, if we make the Zathran Collective an example, we send a different message. Humans protect their own, and the price of attacking us is total destruction." He turned to face his officers. "I am not interested in proportional response. I am interested in making sure this never happens again. We are going to dismantle the Zathran military. We are going to occupy their worlds. We are going to make them remember New Haven for the next 1,000 years. And every other species watching will learn that humanity does not do proportional." The Retribution fleet, now numbering 34 warships after more vessels joined from nearby sectors, began its campaign 6 days after the attack on New Haven. The first target was a Zathran military shipyard in the Kelmar system. A third of their fleet was there for maintenance and repairs. The attack came without warning. Human ships appeared already firing, their weapons coordinated with frightening precision. The shipyard's defenses, designed to stop pirate raids and small attacks, were overwhelmed in minutes. 27 Zathran warships were destroyed while docked. The shipyard itself was reduced to floating wreckage. The human fleet suffered 6 damaged ships and 0 deaths. The Zathran Collective's military command scrambled to respond. They pulled fleets from occupation duty. They called back ships from patrol routes. They prepared for a defensive war. They still believed they were dealing with an angry but cautious species that would accept a negotiated settlement eventually. They were completely wrong. Admiral Patterson's fleet struck 3 more systems in the next 2 weeks. Military bases, supply depots, and command centers were destroyed with systematic efficiency. The humans did not target civilian populations, but they showed no mercy to military targets. More importantly, wherever human forces found species enslaved by the Zathran, they freed them. Entire worlds were liberated. Their populations were armed and given the means to resist if the Zathran tried to return. The Zathran Collective Council met in emergency session on their homeworld of Zath Prime. The council members, representing the various clans that ruled the collective, argued frantically. "We must negotiate," said Council Member Thexril. "The humans are destroying our military. At this rate, we will have nothing left to defend our core worlds." "Negotiate from a position of weakness?" Council Leader Vexcal demanded. "We have never surrendered to any species. We are the conquerors." "We were the conquerors," Thexril corrected bitterly. "Now we are losing a war we started by attacking a defenseless colony. The humans are making an example of us. Then we escalate," another council member suggested. "We have the numbers. We commit our entire fleet and crush the human force while it is separated from their support." This was exactly what Admiral Patterson wanted them to do. Human intelligence had intercepted every Zathran communication. They knew the collective was gathering forces for a decisive battle. Patterson chose the location carefully. The Tarsus system, a Zathran-controlled world with few civilians and significant strategic value. The Retribution fleet arrived at Tarsus and took up position. They appeared unaware that 200 Zathran warships were coming to surround them. It was a trap, but not the kind the Zathran thought they were setting. "Admiral, enemy contacts entering the system," Commander Hayes reported. "Count as 212 ships. They are coming in from 4 directions." "Perfect," Patterson said calmly. "All ships prepare for the Hammond maneuver." The Hammond maneuver, named after the protocol, was a tactic only humans had fully developed. It relied on the principle that in space warfare, the side willing to accept higher risks could win against superior numbers. The human ships did not retreat or form a defensive position. Instead, they scattered. Each vessel took an independent course at maximum speed. They flew directly toward the incoming Zathran fleet, weaving through the enemy formation like needles through cloth. At such high speeds and close ranges, shields became less effective. Weapons fire was more likely to hit. But the humans had trained for this. Every captain, every gunner, every pilot knew their role in the chaos. The battle that followed was brutal. Human ships took terrible damage. Several were destroyed, but they were moving too fast and too unpredictably for the Zathran to coordinate their fire effectively. Meanwhile, human weapons found their targets with disturbing accuracy. The secret was integration. Every human ship was connected to a combat network that shared targeting information in real time. When one ship's sensors locked onto an enemy, every other ship knew about it instantly. They did not fight as individual vessels. They fought as a single organism. The Zathran fleet, designed for conquering weaker species, was not prepared for an opponent that fought with such coordination and ferocity. Their formations broke down. Ships collided with each other, trying to track fast-moving human vessels. Confusion spread through their command structure. When the human Retribution fleet finally regrouped at the edge of the system, the Zathran had lost 147 ships. The humans had lost 8, with another 12 badly damaged. Captain Emma Stone, commanding the destroyer Relentless, looked at the tactical display and felt grim satisfaction. Her ship had taken heavy damage. 2 of her crew were dead and a dozen more injured. But they had broken the Zathran fleet. "All human vessels, this is Admiral Patterson. Well done, now we finish this." The Terran carrier Valiant dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Kepler 442 system. She came with her entire battle group, 3 destroyers, 2 cruisers, and 8 support ships. Captain Helen Cruz stood on the bridge looking at the tactical display with cold anger in her eyes. "How long until we reach New Haven?" she asked her navigation officer. 3 hours at combat speed, Captain. Make it 2 hours. I want to launch our fighters the moment we are close enough. Captain, the Zathran fleet is still in orbit around the colony planet. Lieutenant Sam Foster reported from the tactical station. 12 warships. We are outnumbered. Helen Cruz smiled, but it was not a pleasant smile. Then they are outnumbered too. They just do not know it yet. The Zathran had never fought humans in a space battle before. They had looked at intelligence reports and studied human tactics. They concluded that human ships were decent but nothing special. Human weapons had good range but average power. Human shields were strong but normal. Human fighters were numerous but weak individually. All of this was technically true. What the reports failed to explain was that humans had built their entire way of fighting around one simple idea. If you are going to fight, fight to win completely. Commander Vexthor got the alert about approaching human ships while he was planning another assault on the shelter tunnels. He was not worried. 12 Zathran warships were more than enough to handle a few human vessels. "Move the fleet to stop them," he ordered. Leave 3 ships here to continue bombing the colony. The rest will deal with the humans. What Vexthor did not know was that the Valiant battle group was not alone. Admiral George Patterson had activated the Retribution fleet the moment New Haven's distress signal came through. 27 warships, pulled from 3 different sectors of space, had been traveling toward Kepler 442 for the past 4 days. They were 36 hours behind the Valiant, but they were coming. More importantly, every human military ship within 100 light-years of New Haven had changed course. The Hammond Protocol was not just a distress signal, it was a call to arms. When one human colony was attacked, the entire human military responded. The Zathran fleet moved to engage the Valiant's battle group, leaving 3 ships behind to keep bombing New Haven. It seemed like a reasonable decision based on what they knew about human capabilities they were about to learn. Their knowledge was incomplete. Captain Cruz launched her fighters. When they were still 20 minutes from weapon range, 60 small craft streamed from the Valiant's launch bays, flying in tight groups. The Zathran point defense systems tracked them calmly. Just a standard fighter attack, nothing to worry about. Then the fighters split up. Each one took a different path and began moving at speeds that should not have been possible for craft carrying living pilots. Because humans had figured out something most other species had not. If you accepted that your fighter pilots would experience crushing forces and possible injury, you could build much faster and more agile craft. Human fighter pilots called it pulling the pain. Every pilot who flew in combat knew they would finish the battle bruised, sometimes with cracked ribs or torn muscles from the extreme maneuvers. But they could dance around enemy fire in ways that seemed impossible. The Zathran ships opened fire. The human fighters danced through the weapons blasts. They were not untouched. 12 fighters exploded in the first pass, but the survivors reached their targets and released their missiles. Human fighter missiles were small, barely larger than torpedoes. But they were fast and smart, and there were hundreds of them. The Zathran ship's shield stopped the first wave. They held against the second wave. They collapsed under the third wave. By the time the Valiant and her capital ships got close enough to fire their own weapons, 2 Zathran warships were crippled and leaking air into space. All ships, focus fire on their command vessel, Captain Cruz ordered. I want that thing destroyed. The Valiant's main guns fired. Massive railguns launched projectiles at incredible speed. The kinetic energy alone was devastating. The Zathran command ship's shields lasted exactly 4 seconds before failing. The next shots punched through the hull. The ship broke apart in an explosion of fire and debris. Commander Vexthor, leading the 3 ships still orbiting New Haven, watched in horror as his fleet was systematically destroyed. How were the humans doing this? Their ships were supposed to be inferior. All vessels retreat to... His order was cut off as his 3 ships came under attack from an unexpected direction. Paul Henderson had been busy during the siege. As chief engineer, he knew every system in New Haven, including old mining tunnels that connected to a small spaceport on the far side of the continent. That spaceport had 2 cargo shuttles and 1 small mining ship with weapons designed for breaking up asteroids. It was not much, but it was something. Paul had gathered every person in the colony who could fly anything. They launched a desperate attack from below while the Zathran were focused on the Valiant above. 3 small craft against 3 warships should have been suicide, but the Zathran ships were not expecting an attack from the planet's surface, and human desperation made up for a lot of disadvantages. The mining ship, piloted by a colonist named Marcus Webb who used to haul freight, rammed directly into a Zathran destroyer's engine section at full speed. The explosion lit up the night sky over New Haven like a second sun. The 2 cargo shuttles, flown by pilots named Rita Chang and Kevin Walsh, managed to damage another Zathran ship before being shot down. They knew they were not coming back. They launched anyway because it might save their families in the shelters below. By the time the battle ended 2 hours later, the Zathran fleet was destroyed. 9 ships were reduced to floating debris. 3 ships, including Vexthor's, were damaged but intact. Their commanders were desperately trying to surrender. Captain Cruz accepted their surrender, but only after making absolutely sure her fighters had disabled their weapons and engines completely. Down in the New Haven shelters, the colonists heard the explosions stop. Then they heard something on their communication channels that made many of them cry with relief. The voice of Captain Helen Cruz, speaking in English. New Haven, this is the Terran carrier Valiant. The enemy fleet is destroyed. We are coming to get you out. Hold on just a little longer. Linda Martinez grabbed the communication console, her legs suddenly weak. Tears ran down her face. Valiant, this is Governor Martinez. Thank you. Thank you so much. No need to thank us, Governor. You and your people held off an invasion force for 5 days with nothing but courage and makeshift weapons. If anyone deserves thanks, it is you. The rescue operations began immediately. Terran Marines landed and started clearing out the remaining Zathran ground forces. Medical ships arrived with supplies and doctors. Engineers began working to restore power and life support to the damaged parts of the colony. Danny Cole, exhausted beyond anything he had ever felt before, shook hands with the Marine commander. Lieutenant Colonel Frank Morrison, glad you could make it. Would not have missed it for anything. You colonists did real good, real good. In the temporary medical area, Dr. Price finally got the help he desperately needed. Terran Navy medical staff arrived with supplies, equipment, and fresh personnel. Nicole Grant almost collapsed with relief when she saw them walking through the door. How many did we lose? Captain Cruz asked Linda Martinez as they walked through the damaged colony together. Over 1,000 dead, 300 wounded, Linda replied, her voice hollow and empty. A third of our population. I'm sorry. We got here as fast as we could. I know. And you saved the rest of us. That is what matters now. What Linda did not know yet was that this was just the beginning. The Hammond Protocol had been activated. The human military was still mobilizing. The Retribution fleet was still coming. And humanity was about to teach the galaxy a lesson about what happens when you attack their colonies. The Zathran attack began at sunrise, exactly as Commander Vexthor had planned. Bright bolts of plasma fire fell from the sky like rain. They hit the colony's shield generators first. New Haven's defensive shields were designed to protect against space radiation and small meteors, not military weapons. The shields lasted about 40 seconds before they failed completely. Linda Martinez ran through the shaking corridors of the control building as explosions rocked the structure. Dust fell from the ceiling and lights flickered on and off. Get everyone to the shelters now, she shouted into her communication device. Paul, are the emergency systems working? Working on it. Paul Henderson's voice came back, strained with effort. The main reactor took a direct hit. I am trying to reroute power from the backup systems. In the living areas, Karen Bishop grabbed her daughter and ran. Greg had been in the outer fields when the attack started. She tried not to think about what might have happened to him as she pulled Sophie toward the underground shelters. They never expected to actually need these shelters. Danny Cole stood in the security center, trying to coordinate their defense with what little they had. His 6 security officers had become leaders for groups of colonists who had grabbed whatever weapons they could find. Hunting rifles that farmers used, mining lasers meant for cutting rock, industrial tools. Against Zathran combat armor, these weapons were almost useless. Jake, what is happening in the eastern sector? Danny spoke into his headset. Officer Jake Morrison's voice crackled back through static. We have about 40 civilians barricaded in the processing plant. Zathran ground troops are landing. We can see their ships coming down. Hold your position. Make them fight for every inch. Danny knew it was hopeless. They all did. But humans had learned a saying during their expansion into space. We do not go quietly into the dark. The Zathran soldiers moved through New Haven with brutal efficiency. They were insect-like creatures, standing nearly 8 feet tall with forearms and natural armor plating on their bodies. They had been bred for war over thousands of years. Humans, with their soft skin and fragile bodies, should have been easy to defeat. The first Zathran squad that entered the processing plant learned something different. Jake Morrison had set up his defensive position carefully. He used mining explosives as makeshift bombs. He weakened support beams so they would collapse when hit by weapons fire. And he had 40 civilians who had decided they would rather die fighting than be captured. When the Zathran soldiers came through the door, the colonists opened fire. Hunting rifles cracked. Mining lasers powerful enough to cut through solid rock burned through Zathran armor. The building's ceiling collapsed on the second wave of attackers, burying them under tons of metal and concrete. The Zathran won that fight, but it cost them dearly. Of the 45 soldiers who entered the processing plant, only 22 walked out alive. They found 36 human bodies in the wreckage. They also found 5 wounded humans who refused to surrender, fighting until their last breath. Commander Vexthor looked at the casualty reports with growing confusion. This was supposed to be easy. The humans had no military training, no proper weapons, and no chance of winning. Yet they were fighting like cornered animals, taking down trained Zathran soldiers with improvised tactics and desperate courage. By midday, the Zathran controlled most of the colony's surface buildings. But the humans had retreated to the underground shelters. These shelters had been designed as emergency housing, with their own power generators, water supplies, and air recycling systems. They could keep the entire colony population alive for months if necessary. Linda Martinez stood in the main shelter's command room, surrounded by her senior staff. They had lost over 400 colonists in the first attack, with many more wounded. Dr. Price was working day and night in the temporary medical area they had set up. The distress signal is still transmitting, Paul Henderson reported. He had ash on his face and a bandage wrapped around his left arm, where he had been cut by flying debris. The Zathran have not found all the relay stations yet. How long can we hold out? Linda asked. Danny Cole pulled up displays on the computer screen. We have food and water for 3 months. Ammunition is the problem. We are down to what we had in emergency storage and whatever we grabbed during the retreat. Maybe a few days' worth, a week if we are very careful with every shot. Then we make every shot count, Linda said firmly. Tell everyone. We are not surrendering. Even if help does not come in time, we make these creatures pay for every inch they take. Nicole Grant entered the command room. Her medical clothes were stained with blood. Governor, we need to talk about the wounded. We are running out of antibiotics and surgical supplies. Some of these people need medical treatment we cannot provide with what we have left. Linda closed her eyes for a moment. Every decision was impossible. Every choice had a terrible cost. Do the best you can, Nicole. That is all any of us can do right now. Above ground, Commander Vexthor was dealing with problems he never expected. The humans had destroyed their own equipment before retreating. Power reactors were locked down or blown up. Computer systems were wiped clean. The farming domes had been set on fire. The colony's resources, which were supposed to make this raid profitable, were mostly destroyed or useless. Worse, the humans kept attacking. Small groups would come out of hidden tunnels, strike at Zathran positions, and disappear before reinforcements could arrive. They used their knowledge of the terrain to set up ambushes in places that should not have concealed anything. One group, led by a colonist named Chris Bailey, who had been a construction manager, focused on destroying Zathran vehicles. They used mining explosives to collapse roads. They damaged landing pads so transport ships could not use them. Once they even managed to steal a Zathran tank, drove it straight into an ammunition storage area, and blew it up. The Zathran had enough firepower to simply destroy the shelters and bury the humans alive underground. But Vexthor had orders to capture the colony mostly intact. His superiors wanted the resources, the technology, the infrastructure, so instead he settled in for a siege. He would starve them out. 4 days after the attack began, the humans were still fighting. The casualty ratio was brutal. 10 humans died for every Zathran killed. But that was not the point. The point was that they were still fighting at all. In the shelters, supplies were running low. Wounded people filled the medical area. Children tried not to cry when they heard explosions from above. But nobody talked about giving up. Linda Martinez made a recording every day. She knew that even if they all died, eventually someone would find these recordings. She wanted Earth to know what happened here. She wanted their story told. This is Governor Linda Martinez of New Haven Colony, Day 4 of the siege. We have lost 683 people. We are running low on everything except determination. The enemy thinks they can wait us out and we will surrender. They do not understand that every day they stay here, every resource they waste trying to dig us out is a victory for us, because help is coming. We know it is. And when our fleet arrives, these aliens are going to learn what happens when you attack humanity. She did not know if she truly believed it anymore, but her people needed to believe it, so she spoke the words with complete confidence. What Linda Martinez did not know was that her distress signal had been received. The response was already on its way, and it was far bigger than the Zathran could possibly imagine. In the shelters, families huddled together. Parents tried to comfort frightened children. Engineers worked to keep the systems running. Medical staff treated the wounded with dwindling supplies. Security officers prepared for the next Zathran assault on the shelter entrances. And above them, the Zathran continued their siege, confident that the humans would eventually run out of supplies and be forced to surrender. They had no idea what was coming for them. The morning sun rose over New Haven Colony, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. Linda Martinez stood by the large window in the control building, watching the twin moons fade as daylight spread across the valleys. She held a warm cup of coffee in her hands and smiled. This was her favorite time of day. 3,000 people lived on New Haven now. They had come from Earth seeking a new life among the stars. The colony sat on a planet called Kepler 442b, a world of rolling hills and clear skies. It was peaceful here, safe. Paul Henderson walked up beside her carrying 2 fresh cups of coffee. His hands were rough and scarred from years of fixing machines and building things. He was the chief engineer, the man who kept everything running. "Pretty morning," Paul said, handing her one of the cups. "Every morning here is pretty," Linda replied. She was the governor, the person in charge of making sure the colony ran smoothly. "Sometimes I forget how far we are from home." Down in the farming areas, people were already working. Karen Bishop drove a big harvester through rows of wheat. Her husband Greg was checking the water systems. Their daughter Sophie was getting ready for school. She had been excited all week about a science project she wanted to show her teacher. At the small hospital, Dr. Alan Price looked over his supply lists. They were running low on some medicines. The supply ship from Earth was late, but they would manage. His nurse, Nicole Grant, was setting up for the morning patients. Danny Cole made his usual rounds through the living areas. He was the security chief, though there was not much security work to do. The biggest problems he dealt with were small arguments between neighbors and one time when some teenagers took a construction vehicle for a joyride. His team of 6 security officers was more than enough for a quiet colony like New Haven. Nobody knew that their world had been noticed by something dangerous. Far away in space, an alien race called the Zathran Collective had spotted the human colony. The Zathran were warriors. They had been conquering other worlds for hundreds of years. When their scout ships found New Haven, they saw an easy target, a small settlement with almost no defenses, far from any help. Commander Vex Thor looked at the readings on his display screen. The human colony showed almost no military power. A few light weapons, some basic shields around important buildings, nothing that could stop even a small attack. "This will be easy," he told his officers. "We attack tomorrow at sunrise. Take their resources, remove anyone who fights back, and claim the planet for the collective." The Zathran had conquered 47 different alien races during their expansion across the galaxy. Humans would be number 48. They had done some research on humans. They knew humans were new to space travel, just starting to build colonies away from Earth. They knew human technology was okay but not special. They knew human ships were slower than Zathran ships. What they did not know was what humans would do when someone attacked their colony. They did not understand that humans do not believe in small responses to big problems. They did not know about the special orders every human colony had received. If attacked, survive any way you can and help will come. Most importantly, they did not know about something called the Hammond Protocol. As the Zathran fleet moved closer to New Haven, Linda Martinez was having dinner with her staff. They talked about crop yields and plans to expand the colony. Paul Henderson was teaching his son Marcus how to fix a water filter. Danny Cole was playing chess with Officer Jake Morrison in the security office. The colony's automatic defense satellites picked up the approaching fleet at 11 at night. Alarms started blaring throughout New Haven. Danny Cole ran to the command center, his heart beating fast. The display screen showed 12 Zathran warships entering orbit around their planet. He had never seen anything like this before. "Governor, we need to get people out of the outer areas," he said, keeping his voice calm even though fear gripped his chest. Linda was already at the communications panel. "I am sending the distress signal now." She typed in her command codes and sent the message on all frequencies. Then she activated a second system, one she had hoped never to use. The Hammond Protocol was simple. When a human colony was attacked, a special beacon would send out more than just a call for help. It would send exact location, enemy details, and a single repeating message. "They came for us. Make them regret it." Across the galaxy, in every human military base, the message was received. At Terran Defense Fleet Headquarters, Admiral George Patterson saw the alert flash on his screen. His face went cold and hard. "How many ships do we have in that area?" he asked. "The carrier Valiant and her battle group, sir. 4 days away if they push their engines hard. Get them moving, and activate the Retribution fleet. His assistant paused. Sir, the Retribution fleet? That is 27 warships. Is that not too much for a single colony attack? Admiral Patterson turned to look at him. The assistant saw something frightening in the old officer's eyes. Son, when someone attacks our people, there is no such thing as too much. Those aliens just made the worst mistake of their lives. By the time we are done, their entire species will know the name New Haven. Back on New Haven, the colonists were preparing for the worst. People grabbed their children and ran toward the underground shelters. These shelters had been built as emergency housing, with their own power and air systems. Every colony had them, but nobody ever thought they would really need them. Paul Henderson worked frantically to secure the power systems. If the colony lost power, the shields would fail and they would be defenseless. He called out orders to his engineering team, trying to prepare for an attack none of them had trained for. Karen Bishop held Sophie tight as they ran through the streets. She did not know where Greg was. He had been out in the far fields when the alarms started. She tried not to think about that as she hurried toward the nearest shelter entrance. Dr. Price started preparing the hospital for casualties. He knew they were about to have wounded people, probably a lot of them. Nicole Grant helped him set up extra beds and organize their limited medical supplies. Danny Cole distributed weapons to anyone who could use them. Hunting rifles, mining lasers, anything that could be turned into a weapon. He knew it would not be enough. Against alien soldiers with advanced armor and weapons, the colonists might as well be throwing rocks. But humans had a saying that every colonist learned during training: we do not go quietly into the dark. Linda Martinez stood in the command center and looked at her people on the security cameras. Families running for shelter, engineers working to protect critical systems, security officers taking up defensive positions even though they knew the odds were terrible. She pressed the button to activate the colony-wide speakers. "People of New Haven," she said, and her voice echoed through every street and building. "We are under attack. Get to the shelters. Follow your emergency training. And remember, we are not alone. Earth knows what is happening. Help is coming. We just need to hold on until it gets here." She did not know if help would arrive in time, but her people needed hope, so she gave it to them with absolute confidence in her voice. Above the colony, the Zathran warships took up positions. Weapon systems powered up. Target locks were acquired. Commander Vexthor gave the order: begin the attack. The first plasma bolts rained down from the sky just as the sun was rising over New Haven. The siege had begun.